Coming onto the stage in just a second, we've got 3 leaders from industry who are our current Media Leaders of the Year. So we have Media Owner, Media Leader of the Year. We have the International Media Leader of the Year, and we have the Media Agency and CEO of the Year as well. So please give a warm welcome. You can see them up on the stage now, Duncan, Rachel, and Milka. You sit wherever you like. You know.
I'll go sit next to you. Hello.
So welcome. You've got the headline slot, and you've got a very tough couple of slots to finish. So no pressure, guys, at all on this. So look, thank you ever so much for joining us. You know, as I mentioned from the outset, you are 3 of our reigning Media Leaders of the Year. And I think there's a lot that we can kind of get into. We've only got, you know, a short period of time. So we're going to celebrate leadership. We're going to discuss your careers. We're going to look at insight, wisdom. You're going to share your experiences, the advice and the people that inspired you, and what you would have, of course, told yourself all those years ago. But first we get into all of that. Rachel, you are leaving UM, so where are you going? I'm joking. I'll
tell you later.
So look, we've obviously this is for the Future 100 Club, and the Future 100 Club was created to have as many different types of people within that list, rather than kind of pigeonholing people in that, you know, certain areas where they're now. So I'm going to start with the question that we've got up there, or the statement we've got up there, and I'll come to you first of all, Duncan, at the end there. When you started out in your career, and you kind of look back now, what would be the one thing that you kind of wish you could have told yourself at that point?
I knew this question was coming. I mean, it's a really difficult question. I think there's a few things that kind of spring to mind. But before I answer it, I think what's important also is to give it a bit of context, because when I think back to when I started my career, the landscape was just so different. And I think that's the one thing that I think is really important to understand. I think where we are now, because of COVID, which has accelerated so many things, you know, we're facing probably the most challenging moment in the media industry and in business generally, of like the younger generations kind of coming through, not wanting to kind of be like their parents, older generations living and working longer, and you know that presents a real challenge for businesses. So I think what I knew, or what I wanted to know then, would be very different, I guess, of what I would want to tell my kids now. That's my kind of way of answering that question. But I think the thing that I would probably tell myself as a younger person is, whatever you do, you are going to fail. Like, failure will happen to everyone, and it does happen. And it's really making sure you approach that with the right mindset of like, that is your best opportunity to learn. It's where you learn the most about yourself in terms of how you react and respond, and actually it's where you get your most important learnings for you to develop yourself. Yeah. And I know that we've all spoken and that come up as well, so I'm going to hold that thought for a moment, because I'm going to come back and find out what your most spectacular failures were and what we learned from those. But Rachel, I'm going to go to you again, the question again around what do you wish you could have told yourself when you started out?
Yeah, I think just to build on that though, I think it is that whole thing around test and learn, isn't it? And test and fail quickly. And I think that is the thing. And I think my point really is around confidence. And I think having the confidence to not know everything, but actually appear like you do. So there's a whole thing around kind of like, no, fake it till you make it, you know, and I can do that, I think, in the media world. I mean, I'm not suggesting any surgeons would ever fake it till you make it. You do not want to go in that theatre without knowing exactly what you're doing. But especially in our business, I think it's that whole confidence that not everybody knows everything, and not everybody has all the answers, you know, a bit like they build on yours, that, you know, and sometimes you'll win, sometimes you'll lose, but actually to have the confidence to have an opinion and put that forward. And actually it was something that it was like I was reading Obama's book. It's quite a few years ago now, but he just said, look, I just realized that everybody's winging it. I was thinking, if it's good enough for Obama, it's good enough for me. So I think it's not about being completely not knowing what you're doing, but I think it's just having that confidence that it's a bit like, again, I don't, whether it's a female trait or a male trait. If you think about classrooms, probably that I grew up with, a teacher would ask a question, and before she'd even finish the question, all the boys would have their hands up, and all the girls would be waiting and thinking. So I think it's that whole thing of, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be 100% right for everything, but do give it a go, because you do have to, especially again you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to take some risks. So have the confidence to do that, because there's not one person that knows everything exactly at that moment in time. So have some confidence and fake it till you make it is what I'd say.
Do you think, just as a follow-up to that we do a good enough job in terms of creating that environment, and anyone can pick this question up, in terms of allowing failure to happen, or to allow it's okay to not know everything? Do you think we do good enough there at all? No?
It's difficult, isn't it? I think there's obviously lots of examples that do encourage that and do a pretty good job, but the difficulties of running a business and the pressures that come with continued success, it is a real balance. And I think, to Rachel's point, you've got to have the mentality of fail fast and learn quickly. But it's always, there's so many challenges now that everyone faces. You've got to just keep adapting and adapting and adapting the whole time. So I think, to ever suggest you've ever got everything right, or even allow yourself to think it, is dangerous.
I don't think we necessarily talk about it enough, because the reality is we all fail at any level. So now each organization will say will strive to have a culture in which people try and fail, and that's rewarded. But how you see that? And I think do you see it in how people talk about what success is? Is success the metric, the thing? And that's where we normally spend the time, instead of talking about the learning. And when I look back in my career, I think a CV is the highlight of all the things that went really well. But you don't see all the things that happened before that were the massive failures. All the jobs I didn't get. There's more of those that I didn't get that I actually got. I give this example. Earlier in my career, I was doing business development, and I won this big award, Business Development Deal of the Year, massively celebrated. Now nobody asked me, nobody knew that the year before, when I say failed miserably, I failed miserably and publicly, like into the world I was in, and I was like, how did I not get fired? But I learned so much from that then the following year I won it. But again, I have to be pushed to tell that story. Like in the way we present ourselves to the world, we just talk about the highlights, which are normally on the back of so much of those learnings.
It'd be interesting if we just flipped our CVs then, wouldn't it? And just imagine getting a CV which is full of failures.
They did that in Silicon Valley. It was a big trend for a while, where you had your failure CV, and that was basically if you hadn't kind of launched a company that had gone bankrupt,
you were out.
You wouldn't have a chance of getting the job. No, it was I don't know if they're still doing it, but it was a big thing for a while.
Interesting. Milga, would there be anything you'd add to that piece that we were saying, what you maybe would have told yourself?
I reflected on this over the last few days, and what I actually decided I wish I would tell my younger self is to be braver in being myself. And that has several traits. Very often throughout my career, I'm Bulgarian, I have lived in 5 different countries, English is not my first language, so I've had all these areas where I would feel I don't belong, but I was trying to pretend as if I belong, and that will come into various forms. So earlier again, there was a point where basically I was wearing fake glasses because I thought it's going to look more professional. My hair, as you can see, is very curly. In every big meeting, I'll pull it back. I had this one dress that I was wearing for the really important meetings. So I was just masking myself. Then I moved to the UK, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know anyone. I'm going to have to pretend I know anyone. But actually, these were some of the things that I was bringing as diverse perspective. And when I look back, I just feel I had so many years where I was just trying to be what I thought a leader should be, and that was normally a very public version of whatever leaders were at the time. So that's the thing. Is how can I could have been more brave to be me and to bring more of me.
That leads us very nicely into what I was going to ask next. Then, so what is leadership? What does it mean to you three in terms of what that means? And also, I think picking up on, there's a lot of noise out there at the moment. I know we spoke about it. These 30-second clips of Gary Vaynerchuk or Stephen Bartlett, and it's successful people in their own right. But I feel like there's so much pressure now to be a leader, and I'm a bit confused as to what a leader actually is now. So you mentioned it there, Milka. Why don't you pick up on that first of all, what that means to you?
I think the reason why it's becoming confusing, like what is a leader? You know, in companies talk about leader doesn't have to be a manager. No, and I actually do believe that, just to be super clear, because I think there's...
You believe a leader does have to be a manager?
Doesn't have to be a manager. I think a manager has to be a leader, but a leader, you don't necessarily need to be a leader to be in a managerial position. Because the role of the manager for me is you're a manager first, and then you do all the other things that you do. And so as a leader, I think a lot of what comes to that, how do you get people to rally people behind the cause? But I think what a manager has to do is really think about that team first. And the more you progress, I think, in your career, some of the things that change is what defines success and what gives you energy. Is it the individual, like is it, and there's not a right or wrong answer here, but is it something that you do yourself and you want to say, I've done this? Or is it the success that you do through others? I mean, there's not a single thing that I have done myself, like not a single thing. You know, all the work that I do is through other people. And the second thing with that is my team doesn't know what I do on a day-to-day basis. If you ask them. I mean, and that's the truth. But they don't need to know because my role is to create, you know, systems and culture and an environment in which people can do their best job. But you know, do they need to know all the things that go in that? No, they don't. So I think the bigger change and shift in the career is that acknowledgement that you're starting to deliver results and to drive change through others versus yourself.
Anything else on that? What it means to you?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the, I was going to say, a leader is to create that environment, you know, as Milka said, for people to thrive. So for people to thrive in a business, and I think it does go back. It's allowing people to the best that they can be. And I think, you know, from when you had to wear your fake glasses and your hair straight back. I mean, I don't know, my hair isn't curly there, but I also, you know, I think it is that whole thing of what's professional. And I thought, well, my hair doesn't look as professional curly, but I now wear it curly a lot more. But I think it's, you know, we talk about, a lot of organisations do, about bringing your whole self to work. Because if you're trying to be somebody else, then you can't thrive. And again, I think building on it in terms of the failure bit, you've got to create some form of psychological safety net that people do feel that they've got the freedom to have their own ideas, to have that whole more of an entrepreneurial kind of mindset and environment. Because if everybody's just not given that space to think and bring new ideas, then we're wasting people's resources, because that's actually where the magic happens when people can bring that. So I think we've really massively moved on as workplaces, and it's very much like, you know, welcoming everybody to be themselves. But then also I think, you know, especially through COVID, you know, the whole empathy thing is now a bit, you know, you've got to meet people where they are and realise that, again, to thrive, you've got to be, you know, put in an environment where you're able to do that. But, you know, it is also, though, as a leader, they're looking for direction. So you need to set the strategy and the plan and the course of direction, and then allow people the freedom in that. But at the end of the day, people are looking at you to, you know, and sometimes those decisions that you make, they're not going to be welcomed by everybody. But you also, you know, you need to be, you know, stick to the plan, be decisive and do that. But at the same time, create an environment where people can thrive.
Mm.
I think we're still in a really interesting moment where we're kind of transitioning between the old perception of leaders, and what that meant, into this kind of new era. And you know, a load of the things you've already said around empathy, but I think, you know, things like coaching is going to be much more important. Listening, like deep listening, I think they're all skills that are needed to be able to, you know, ultimately support your teams and your clients effectively, but really understand what the challenges are. Because I think the role of a leader, and it's been touched on, is to be at the service of the company to create the foundation so that everyone can excel. And, you know, as Rachel said, it's then understanding what's important and simplifying that message, making it really easy for people to understand, and then making those key decisions and explaining them, right? Yeah. Explaining, like making sure people understand, well, look, you might not like it, but this is why we needed to do it. Because I think if people understand the reasons, then it's a lot easier to kind of accept those and jump on board.
Okay. I'm going to offer questions out again as well, so please do have a think. If anyone's got a question now, do shoot your hand up. There's one over there. Can't see who that is.
In the last talk, we talked about kind of diversity in the newsroom. I think it's definitely something we've seen prevalent in our industry, diversity at that top level. What do you think the industry is doing right in that space, and what do you think we should do more of?
I mean,
Did everyone hear that, by the way, that question? Yeah, okay.
It's it's a really interesting question because, there's so many levels that we need to, so leaders in their own right need to make sure that they're building diverse teams, diversity of thoughts, obviously, again, brings new ideas and, representative of the population. So there's an individual, and then there's a company, then there's an industry. So I think there's, so you've got the all-in survey, census, you've got obviously lots of things like Creative Equals and MIFA. There's lots of, so if you start from the macro level, there's lots of really good, and I won't have mentioned half of them, industry practices around how we are, an industry that is has representation. So I think that's good. I think most organisations, I would be very surprised if they didn't have a whole kind of plan around it. We have a five-point strategy around it at Media Brands, and it's all about, so it's about attraction, so making sure we've got diverse pools even in the so really looking at all of your recruitment policies, making sure that you're working with the right partners. There's some practices that might have been, years old. It's like, so I think I would be very surprised if most organisations haven't sorted the recruitment out. So we talk about the 3 A's of attraction. And then advancement, so Creative Equals do some brilliant programs. As I say, there's really brilliant industry resources and then great programs, I would have thought, internally at most organisations. But then the main thing is the third A, which is attrition, because there's no point in like going, great, we're going to bring in, it's not, you've got to measure what you treasure. So you also you've got to measure these things because you've got to know how you are advancing. But if you kind of attract a diverse workforce in, and then they get there and don't feel that they can bring their whole self to work, or don't feel that they belong, or don't feel that their ideas are heard from, then we have failed. So I think we're, so I don't know, hopefully, maybe in a few years' time, we should be seeing a lot more of the fruit of that labour. And then also, you've got to, to see it is to be it, isn't it? So I think, so if I look at my own organisation, I think of our leadership team, I think 38% are from diverse backgrounds, ethnically diverse backgrounds. I think that's it's a start, but it's making sure that goes all the way through organisations, and you've got to make sure that you create an environment where everybody feels that they belong, because it's about, we talk about diversity and inclusion. Actually, it's belonging. That's how you thrive, when you feel you belong. Did that answer your question?
I think it's such a broad area as well. I think there's so much good work that's been done, but like often when you look at it, there's so many different areas that you can go into. I just hearing you, Milk, we did a session with our teams talking about English as a second language, and actually the challenges that can present, and making sure that everyone understands that. Because we have a lot of different international members of the team, and so there's so much work to be done in the space of kind of diversity and inclusion, that again, probably because we hadn't really done enough, or we definitely hadn't done enough in the past, we're like everyone's catching up. So I think it's great, but again, it's one of those areas that we've got to still kind of continue to focus and measure the impact of our work.
And just to add, I think there's not one single thing or one big thing that can be done. It's a lot of things, and they're at various levels. And some of them are little, some of them are big, but they have to be done consistently over a period of time. And my hope is actually, as we're talking about this now, is like we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's I think very often we've been focused so much on the diversity, but actually how to make this work, it's we need to focus on the inclusion and equity to make it really, and again, unfortunately it takes time. That is the honest truth, is that it takes time. We all wish it is faster. Do I feel like we can do better? Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to move on to the next part. And so I read through my notes. I realise I did write this at 5:30, and there's some things here where I'm like, wow, what did I write? But you know what? We're all friends here, aren't we? So don't judge me when I write it. First of all, I've kind of led in with key moments, and I don't know why I've done that, because I hate the phrase key moments. I used to have a girlfriend that used to insist on talking about the key moments that we had with each other. She said, well, that was a key moment. Why don't you remember? So I don't know why I've wrote that down. But I want to talk about some of those key moments that you have that stand out for you. And I think that maybe leads on to some of the mistakes. And this next one is absolute genius. I obviously at the time thought, this is great. This is absolute gold dust. People are going to be nodding in agreement. I've said, it's like snakes and ladders. You have to slide down a lot of snakes before you climb ladders. Oh, not my best moment. So let's not use that. Let's talk about some of the moments that stick out for you that have kind of set you on a path in your career, including some of perhaps those big mistakes where you did maybe fail spectacularly, but actually it was the best learning that you could have had from that. Milka, let's start here.
I mean, I think there's a pivotal moment in everybody's career. I think there's a few, but that's one for sure. It's when you become a manager for the first time. And actually, the first 2 times I applied to be a manager, I was not allowed to be a manager. So I did not get the job. These are the jobs I didn't get. So it's really interesting now to look how that, and by the way, they were right. Let me just be clear.
When you say you wasn't allowed to be a manager,
no,
is
not
there something
allowed.
we need to know?
Hired.
You know?
I wasn't hired. Sorry, I wasn't selected. This is English as a second language in practice. I didn't get the job.
I got a little bit worried there for a moment, you know.
I know. Oh, this happens to me all the time, by the way. Unfortunately, this is where, under pressure, the Bulgarian comes out. No, I wasn't. I didn't get the job. The first 2 times I applied to be a manager, I didn't get the job. And I think now looking back, now having many years of leading teams, I think there is a mistake that happens when you first become a manager, and that is that you think of your team as if it's, and I hear this very often, is they're like my children. You think of your team as if they're your family. And I'll tell you why it's a mistake. It's a very noble and empathetic way to approach it, because it means that that person is a very caring manager. But what it doesn't allow you to do is really empower the team to make decisions of their own. Like, I'm responsible for my children, but the teams that I manage, these are adults that make decisions for themselves. So my daughter doesn't have a choice whether she does music or not. She does music. Like, that's not her decision to make. I make it. But for the team, you can create the opportunity. But people have their own choices to make, and their own careers to follow, and their own mistakes to make, and their all acceleration. So I think this is an area where, when you first become a manager, and because I find that people feel so emotionally invested. That it becomes very draining. Like, how do you balance your work and your life, etc. But so really, it's one of those areas where I really think of, they're not your family. I mean, you should care, absolutely, as a leader, absolutely. That's such a threat, and we discussed on empathetic leadership. But that doesn't mean that you're fully responsible for what happens.
And I think we spoke about this, didn't we? COVID played a big part in that, where when we went into lockdown for the first time, we suddenly entered into this weird situation where the people that worked for us were asking us questions that we didn't have the answers to, and you did get into that weird parent-child relationship, didn't we? Rachel, for you, what were perhaps the moments or the failures that stand out for you?
I hadn't thought about this before, but I think building on what Milka said around like empathy, and because I'm a strong believer in everybody's strength is their weakness. So I think my strength is empathy. I think my weakness is empathy, and I think that's, building on that is a bit where you need to listen, you need to meet people where they are, you need to understand, but then as a leader, you then need to make those decisive decisions, because you can listen, and we talk about active listening and really understanding, but at the end of the day, you've got to be decisive, and you've got to be making those tough calls. And I think that's where, if I've looked back, I'd say my failures have been, I've been so, and it's like, you can feel it there. We've got, especially when you're going through tough times, you are in the trenches, and sometimes the leader has to, get out the trench and lead. So I think that's, I'd say, that's something that I've worked on over the years, being empathetic, but sometimes not too far. And then I suppose things like, if you think about past pitches that, so I'm on an agency side, so if we've worked on a pitch and it hasn't been successful, is actually then taking from almost like analysing what worked and what didn't work, and then it's then flipping it. And then actually I can think of one particular example where I actually took the call to pull out of this pitch, because I just felt that we thought everybody was knackered. There's no, there is just, you pitch to win, you don't pitch to take part. But actually, by making that decision, which was a really tough decision to pull out, it actually meant that when a similar business came along a little bit later, we were really well set up to win that. And it almost felt that was meant to happen to set us up to win this one. So I think even like the knockback. So if you get a knockback, or you've got it, sometimes, as I say, make a decision. As long as you make a decision, just stick to it. That's the thing. And look, it might be the right one, it might be the wrong one, but it's a decision. And I think the decision I made on that pitch, I was really gutted at the time, but now, in my obviously wisdom, I thought that was the reason. It's because now we've won this particular pitch. So I think, be kind to yourself as well. You've got to give yourself don't, because we are our own hardest critic, aren't we? So I think try and be kind to yourself.
Okay, Duncan.
I think my probably one moment was when I got my first proper, I guess, leadership role, and I had plenty of knockbacks in getting there. And actually, one of the things that I remember, and actually it was that my wife that gave me this advice actually was, she was saying, be bold and, make sure people know that you really want it, which was really good advice that sticks with me. But the other thing that, and I guess this is a learning from this, and it relates to something you've just said actually, is being really aware of your weaknesses or how you're perceived, why you might not have got the job, and then being really intentional in your messaging with potential hirers to show that you're focusing on them and delivering against them. And that certainly led me into getting some of those roles. I think my moment of failure in that is I had some great success and listened to my own voice a little bit and thought I was Superman and could do everything, and had 12 direct reports and was out trying to be the star of winning the business. And of course things started going downwards. So I think that was my major learning of, you've got to then understand what's most important, and I think that allowed me to kind of really step back and change the whole way I kind of operated and worked.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, but the one thing I did ask you all to prepare, so I don't want to miss it out, was the best advice that you'd ever been given, or the people that inspired you. So you can have both, or you can pick one. Duncan, why don't you kick off with that one?
So best advice, and it still stays me, and this was someone that's mentored me a bit. And I would say also, I just want to say mentoring, because we were talking about this yesterday. I've got a real thing about mentoring that everyone builds it up to be this massive thing, and I did. I was like, I've got to find a mentor. Who's going to be my mentor? It's got to be someone I trust and like and respect. Couldn't find anyone. How am I going to do it? And actually, I think the best thing, it shouldn't be a big thing. I've got a few people, they're not really mentors, they're just people I go to for advice, that they're good in different areas. And I think if I've got a problem here, I'll go to someone in this space. So just wanted to say that, frame it, because I think it is important actually, because we often put too much importance on that. But someone that I really respect has told me, make sure you're an energizer, not an energy sapper. And that is something I think about every morning, and probably about 5 times a day, and talk about a lot with my team, because it just has such a huge impact if you can get particularly a group of people thinking like that. The momentum that you can build is incredible.
Okay. Rachel?
You stole mine one.
But you do put it in a different way.
Well,
so.
no, it's because actually it's a very similar thing, like be a radiator, not a drain. Which is a bit like, and we've all seen it, don't we? Like, somebody walks in and they're like the Dementors, and they suck all the energy out of you. You're like going, you just basically run away from them. Whereas actually, if you're a person where solutions, not problems, and I think that, and actually I heard that from a Wackler at Wackle Gather like 20 odd years ago. So that has stuck, be a radiator, not a drain, with me for 20 years. And then really quick, one person I admire, I worked with her when I was at Stockholm Mediavest Group. We sat on the board together. She was HR, and God, this might be 10 years ago. And I think learning and development, so we talk about mentors, learning and development, she just brought in such progressive, so we did a whole leadership where we were like horse whispering, and I mean, don't ask, but what she did bring in was Buddhist monks. And actually, so 10 years ago, it was really like the start of mindfulness. So I think that whole thing around, that's really stayed with me as well, that, our jobs and, are going to be stressful, our lives are stressful. Everything is pretty, we cannot affect so many external factors, but we can affect how we behave internally, and just, don't be afraid to use those techniques to listen to, headspace, etc. I think there's a real power in that, and that's also sat with me through some dark moments.
That's another session.
Yeah.
Milka, you got the final word.
Oh, wow, that's too much pressure.
Always.
But I actually do believe in mentoring, even though I agree with you, it shouldn't be a big thing. But actually, to me, when I look back, it's one of the reasons why I've gotten so much advice from so many people. But the way I've thought about it is, I see somebody speak at a conference and they say something really, really good, and I go, I'm going to take that. And then sometimes I'll go and talk to them afterwards. Or I've had official mentors, or I've had, and even my team, the people around me in my life, I feel like I have I've created a good support network. So I have places to go when I need advice, or sometimes just to vent. But I also agree with you, creating a full life, which includes us as individuals, as human beings, physical, psychological health, etc. That's what makes us, we are human beings at the end of the day, and work is just a part of who we are.
Okay, what a great way to end. That does bring a close to the future of I. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly learned a lot from all of the sessions today, but for now, please give a round of applause for Duncan, Rachel and Ilka.